Hello, everyone. So for this week, we are going to try to write an essay, and I'm going to be explaining that. So the type of essay that you are going to be writing, it's called an argumentative essay. You are trying to convince me of your side. So in the past 2 weeks, we've talked about the Canadian Pacific Railway, and what you're going to say is either the Canadian Pacific Railway was a positive thing or the Canadian Pacific Railway was a negative thing. So you're choosing one of those sides. There is a third option, which is the Canadian Pacific Railway was a positive thing for Canadians, although it came at a cost. I don't recommend this one unless you're trying to really challenge yourself, because it requires a lot more complexity, because you have to talk about the positives as well as talk about, well, what are the costs of those positives. So this is kind of the order in which you should be doing things. So for your essay, either for or against the Canadian Pacific Railway, start by choosing a side. Are you for or are you against? Then what you're going to do is you're going to brainstorm examples that you can use. Now, if you remember from last week, you'll notice that the research I made you do actually got you to look at pros and cons of the railway. I did that for a good reason, so that it's easier for you to write this essay. Then you're going to fill in the template, write the rough draft, edit it, type up the good copy, edit it again. I cannot stress that enough. You need to look it over again. Then you are going to submit your typed good copy to me. Okay, so a couple reminders for your essay. The first thing is, in your first paragraph, right at the end of it, you're going to tell me what are the points you're going to talk about. That is called a thesis statement. I'll show you an example of that. Now, when I talk about topic sentences, these are for your body paragraphs. This is telling me what that paragraph is about. When you are writing this essay, it also has to be formal. So don't write kids or mom and dad or things like that. You'll say children, mother and father, keep it formal. Also, no personal pronouns. So don't write, in this essay, I will be talking about it, or in my opinion. Don't write that. You are assuming that you are writing this essay from an outside perspective looking in. Same with saying you. So don't say, well, if you were in this situation. Don't write that either. That's not formal. We want formal writing, so no personal pronouns. Make sure also to spell everything out. Don't abbreviate anything. Also, when you're saying they or their, so if you were saying, for instance, they are protesting because they feel that they were being mistreated when they were building the railway, who is they? Make sure it's obvious. Also, make sure that you explain why your example shows that it is for or against your point. So say, for instance, transportation for the railway was a positive thing because, make sure to spell it out. For your concluding sentences, make sure that you basically summarize what that paragraph is about. So on your sheet, you'll notice that you have to brainstorm. So I've given you 2 examples, one of them being, well, what was a good thing about the railway? Well, it allowed the railway to transport goods across Canada. What was a con? Well, there was a major mistreatment of the Chinese workers. They were not treated super well. You obviously have to give more information than just this, but this will help you kind of get started to figure out. So you're either going to have 3 pros or 3 cons, depending on what you're writing your essay about. Okay, so what is your essay going to look like? There are going to be 5 paragraphs. In your first paragraph, this is called your introduction paragraph. So you're going to have a sentence that has an interesting first statement that draws your reader in. Then you're going to talk a little bit about saying, well, you're going to talk about the Canadian Pacific Railway. Your thesis, which is the last sentence in that first paragraph, is going to tell me what your essay is going to be about. It's either going to be for the Canadian Pacific Railway or against. Then you're going to have 3 body paragraphs. So you're going to have your first example, your second example, and your third example. And then each of them you're going to explain that example. It's kind of like a sandwich. That's why this looks like a burger. So you got your stuff at the top and the bottom, but the stuff in the middle is the most important. It's all of the good, meaty, important information. Then your final paragraph, your 5th one, this is you restate your thesis, you give a little summary of the essay, and then you make a final so what statement. So what? You talked about the Canadian Pacific Railway. Okay, so when you look at your template, the first thing is your hook. You want to make a statement that catches the reader's interest. Then everyone is going to write this next sentence. So the intro to the topic. So the Canadian Pacific Railway was built in, whatever year it was built in, and was created to physically unite Canada from coast to coast. Pretty straightforward. So if you do 4, this is what your thesis statement should sound like. The Canadian Pacific Railway was a positive change for Canada as it, and then whatever 3 points you're going to talk about. Or, if you're against it, although the Canadian Pacific Railway was positive for some parts of Canada, it negatively impacted. What are the 3 things that negatively impacted? And if you're going to do the challenging one, this is what your thesis statement will be. Although the Canadian Pacific Railway was positive for some parts of Canada, it came at a cost. That's all you're going to write for that one. Okay? So you're either going to have 3 points for the positive or 3 points for the negative. Okay, so this is just an example of what your first paragraph might look like. So I have my first sentence, which is my hook. So if you look right here, this is my hook. So railways are a fundamental means of transportation for societies. However, like all technology, there is a price for building the railways. That is my first statement. That's a hook. You'll notice that it doesn't give any details. It's just talking about railways in general. That's what a hook is. Then this next sentence right here, this is called my intro. And this statement is just telling me that I'm going to talk about the Canadian Pacific Railway. So the Canadian Pacific Railway was built in 1881 and was created to physically unite Canada from coast to coast. Pretty straightforward. This last statement right here, this is your thesis. So for mine, I chose the last one. So although the Canadian Pacific Railway was positive for some parts of Canada, it came at a cost. This is the most important statement. This is telling me what the essay is going to be about. If you do not have this statement, your essay is not going to make sense. It's, say, for instance, if I said, oh, I'm going to talk about the Industrial Revolution, and then I talk about the Canadian Pacific Railway, you'll see those don't line up. Okay? So your next paragraph, this is called a body paragraph. This is where you do your first example. So this is example number 1. You're going to do a topic sentence. What is this paragraph about? So say you're going to do the pro. What you're going to do is you're going to say one positive example was, and then whatever your point was. If you say do the con, you would say one negative example and then whatever your negative example that you're going to do. Okay? Then you're going to give some important information. You're going to give some actual details about that. Now, you might have to look online to find some of this information. So say for your pro, you talk about transportation. So what you're going to look at is what was some of the transportation that the railway was trucking back and forth. You could think of it had people, there were also goods. What about supplies? Think about those sort of things. If your negative example was the racism towards the Chinese workers, well, give some examples of that. You could talk about the Chinese head tax. You could talk about the fact that they got the most dangerous jobs, things like that. For your concluding sentences, you might say, finish it off with something like to summarize. Summarize. And then just restate what your points were. Oh, I almost forgot. So before your concluding sentence, you want to talk about why. Why does your point show a pro or con? You might say this example shows, say this example shows how positive the railway was. How positive railway was because, and then actually explain, well, why does transportation, why is that a good thing? Or you could change this instead to say, well, this shows how negative the railway was because, well, racism's not good, or something like that. Okay, you see that? Okay, so paragraph 3. This is your second example. You're going to do the same thing. So you're going to do another example. Was, and then state your point. You're going to give some supporting details. You're going to do a concluding sentence. You're going to do basically the same thing, only with the next example. Then paragraph 4. This is your example number 3. So you'll say, you might start it with your topic sentence with a final example. Was, then whatever you're talking about, whatever your third point is, you're going to give some supporting details, give some context, tell me why it was a good or bad thing, then summarize. Okay, so your final paragraph, this is your concluding paragraph. So either this is your choice number one, so if you were for the railway, you'll say through, what are your 3 points? So through A, B, and C. So say through transportation, connecting Canada, giving jobs. One could say the Canadian Pacific Railway was a positive thing for Canadians. This is if you chose the con. So through, again, A, B, C. So through racism, the Pacific scandal, and the cost of the railway, one can see the Canadian Pacific Railway was a negative outcome for many individuals. If you do the third one, I'm not going to give you the answer to that one because that one's meant to be a challenging one. I want to see if you can actually restate your thesis here. Then what you're going to do is you're going to give a summary of the essay. 1 to 2 sentences. You're just summarizing what did you talk about in A, B, and C. What did you talk about in your 3 examples? You might say, some positives were that not only did it bring transportation, which was good for money, it also transported goods, meaning people could get stuff like quicker, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Your thought-provoking final statement. Now for this is your why talk about the railway. Talk about railway. Do you believe that railways are important? Why or why not? Maybe you'll make a statement that says, railways are important, although they have pros and cons, because without them, society would not be able to function in the way it does. Or something like that. However you choose to say that part. Okay, so now we are going to look at how exactly am I marking your essay. I usually mark it on a 6-point scale and then I scale it up. So the essay will probably be out of 12. Okay, so in order for this to be an excellent essay, you got to do a lot of things. Not only does your topic have to be really strong, it has to contain superior recall of accurate content. I want you to be able to actually research this essay. The purpose of your writing is deliberate, easy to understand, easy to follow. So that means your thesis is really, really strong. So thesis. And it's very, very clear what you're trying to write about. Also, your supporting details are precise and original. So you're not just looking on the internet being like, oh yeah, transportation is good because without it, like, people wouldn't be able to get to and from where they're trying to go. Yeah, that's not original. See if you can find some really good reasoning for why you're choosing what you're choosing. And your writing contains insightful conclusions about the topic. So you're able to just like go beyond kind of just, oh, well, it's good because it makes money. See if you can actually like kind of go a little bit farther. So a 5 is, you can see it's strong. A 3 to a 4, it's satisfactory. Like I can mostly understand what you're trying to say. It appears that you followed the template. A 2 to 3, it is limited. It lacks any sort of purpose. It's kind of missing some things. The template is kind of somewhat there, but I think you missed some things. A 1 to 2 is weak, so the topic is missing most of the information. There's no purpose to your writing. The template seems to have not been used. It looks like you didn't really have any examples. And a 0 to 1 is, it doesn't even look like the assignment. It doesn't look like an essay. Okay, I'm going to show you some examples. Now for these examples, I chose a topic. I basically found these on the internet. These are socials, like parts of socials essays, and they're all talking about Canada and the Cold War. So example number 1, you can just kind of scan through it. You can see it's got really strong writing. You can see it right here. This statement right here, Canada's role began in the 1940s and continued to play an active part through means of warfare, peacekeeping, and propaganda into the 1980s. It's a really strong thesis. It is telling me what exactly they're going to talk about. So they're going to say, the first thing they're going to talk about is that it kicked off the Cold War with the Gouzenko affair that provided evidence of the communist spy ring. They go into tons of details. This is a very strong body paragraph. It's very clear what they're going to talk about. They also start it with the fact, it says immediately after World War II, Canada and many other nations were subject to rising conflicts of communism versus democracy in the Cold War. Very nice, very strong. This is, again, not the entire essay, but you can see how much is actually written in, this is a single body paragraph for this. You can already see how strong this is. I'd give this a 5 or a 6. Very strong, easy to understand. Okay, Another example, same topic. So I could see at the beginning, so Canada did not focus on the arms race or development of they spelled something wrong, nuclear weapons. So I could see, yeah, it looks like they're going to talk about not the arms race, and they're going to talk maybe about nuclear weapons. So I can see there's a thesis, but it's not very clear. The Cold War home defense was an issue. You could already see this body paragraph way shorter, and it seems that they kind of knew what they were talking about, but sort of. So it says all these things proved to be effective to Canada because it was never attacked. So it sounds slightly unclear. Like, it sounds like they are talking about the Cold War. They're talking about Canada joining the defensive organization. You'll also notice that this one's got some spelling mistakes in this. I might give this a 3 or a 4. I can see that they still understand the topic, but there's obviously some things missing. And the last one. Oh boy. Okay, so Canada played a role in Cold War events by not getting involved and joining the arms race, by stepping in when Cuba Missile. So first of all, the first issue is the first paragraph is one sentence. That's not good. That's not good. That's not a paragraph. That's a single sentence. Also, they didn't capitalize some things. It also, I'm not entirely sure. So maybe not getting involved in joining the arms race, stepping in when Cuba Missile crisis, and by joining. Okay, so I can see this is a thesis because I can see there are 3 points, but they don't give a hook. There's no introduction to what they're going to be talking about. This is also supposed to be an entire paragraph. They didn't capitalize what they need to capitalize. Canada stayed away from the concept and didn't join. This proved that Canada didn't want it. There is no evidence of anything. It sounds like they knew that they were going to talk about the Cold War, but they didn't give any evidence at all in their paragraph. I'd give this maybe a 1 or 2 out of 6. So this is just to show you some examples of how I'm going to be marking this. I highly recommend that you come into the school or participate in our Zoom meeting this week so I can actually sit with you and help you with your essay. If you would like some one-on-one support for me to sit down through Zoom and actually go through your essay with you, I am more than willing to do that. Please contact me as early as possible because your essay is due this Friday. You have an entire week to write it. So we'll kind of see how that goes. I wish you guys the best of luck. If you have any questions, please, please, please come and see me because this is going to be kind of a bigger assignment. It's going to be worth some more marks. This is a good indicator for me to see how you guys are doing. This is also a mandatory assignment. If you don't finish this essay, your mark is going to be significantly impacted by this. I just want to see what you can write. Even if you don't entirely finish your essay by this Friday, I just want to see what you can come up with. All right, good luck.